Welcome to the a16z podcast. I'm Michael Copeland, and we are here with Benedict Evans. Hey, Benedict. You've got this new post out, and you started off by saying that the smartphone itself is a social platform.
I think that's something that's been clear for a year or two, really. And in fact, I've been saying it for a year or two. That is to say, any app you put on your smartphone can access your address book and can get your photo library and your camera and your location, and it can do push notifications, and it gets an icon on your home screen. And so you don't have to check another site to see if something's happened. You don't have to upload. It's easy to share photographs, and you can get to any new social app you install just by tapping 2 buttons. And so all of the friction that made it, and of course you install the app and instantly you can see all of your friends and tell you who's already using this app. You don't have to go and log into Google or upload an address book file or something. And so all of the friction that made it difficult to use more than one social network on the desktop web goes away on mobile, or almost all of it.
Right.
The only thing that remains is that, well, you've still got to get people actually to install an app. But other than that, once you've got the app installed, it's extremely easy to have more than one of these things. It's extremely easy to switch between the two of them. And this is why we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years an explosion of social messaging apps of various kinds from WhatsApp onwards. I think that much is kind of given. That's been kind of fairly well understood for the last couple of years. I think what's interesting now is that you're kind of going into a second phase beyond that. That we kind of had the first wave of guys who are basically doing SMS plus, or building kind of portals and identity platforms, which is kind of what Line and so on were doing. But then you've had kind of 2 subsequent waves. One of them was building platforms, which is what WeChat most obviously has done, and a few other people have done as well. And the other, which is equally interesting, is finding kind of little pieces of psychology or new types of user behavior and writing off those, which is what you see in Instagram and you see in Snapchat and you see in Meerkat and various other things, and Secret and various other things like that.
And so what you point out, and this is what I want to dig into too, is that Facebook really in that second wave has really led, other technology companies, this kind of driving things with acquisitions, like you say, point out of Instagram and WhatsApp. But
well, they've been driving the catch up. That is to say, they haven't actually created any new behavior since the newsfeed. What they've done is they bought Instagram, and they bought it very early at what at the time everyone said was a ludicrously high price. At the time, it was actually was a very good price. And then they bought WhatsApp.
Right.
So
whether they've seen the second wave coming or whether they helped sort of push it and create it by acquisition, Facebook is really driving a lot of behavior right now. And so let's get into that a little bit. When you talk about like these 3 threads that you can pull out of this second wave that we're seeing and what those are.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 parts to this. On the one hand, can you find some interesting and cool behavior that you can use as a way of gaining user base? And because this sort of smartphone is a social platform dynamic, if you can find that, you can get astonishing growth. You can get 10, 20, 30, 50 million, 100 million users quite quickly. The risk, of course, is actually they can leave really fast as well.
Right.
But then the other part is can you actually build a platform? And this is where the gold is. Because it's one thing to sell your users, which is what Facebook basically does. It's quite another thing, actually, to sell installs and to sell traffic and to sell user acquisition. That's to say, advertising is one thing, but app installs and purchases and e-commerce are quite another. And so what you saw first with WeChat and then with Kik attempted to do this in the West as well, is you actually can build little apps inside a messaging application. And so I can send you, the example would be I can send you a coupon for a Lyft ride in a messaging app, and you get that coupon and you tap on it, and the Lyft experience opens inside the messaging app on your phone without you having to go to the app store and install it. And it then has access to the payment wallet that's built into your messaging app as well, and your location, and so you can see that and you can order the car and you can acquire that user using social as a channel for sharing and engagement without having to get an app installed. And so that was kind of the first. That was kind of the first vision.
Right.
Then what happened last week is that Facebook actually turned around and did something quite different. In a sense, they kind of pulled that whole model inside out, which is very interesting and very clever. what they're doing, I mean, they're actually doing two things. The first thing they're doing, which I'll come back to in a minute, is they're letting websites send messages directly to you in Facebook Messenger, even if they don't have an app installed on your phone. So you can place an order on Gilt.com where you're signed in with Facebook, and Gilt can tell you that order is shipped in Facebook Messenger without you having to install the Gilt app.
I see. So again, it's coming straight through Facebook. And so who owns that?
And then there's a second thing that they're doing, which is that an app that you have on your phone can share content into a Facebook Messenger feed. So if I have an app that makes a cool GIF or a cool video or a cool cartoon, basically stickers, I can write an app that can record video, edit video, cut up all sorts of stuff, and then insert that into Facebook Messenger. And then in Facebook Messenger, there's a little more button that lists all the apps on the App Store that can do this and which of them you've got installed.
So you can send me that sticker. I don't necessarily even have to have the app installed.
You don't have to have the app installed, and there will be a little install this app button underneath that content. And so what Facebook have done is they've made an API for the sticker button, in effect. But the jujitsu part here is you've got that, you've thought up that new piece of psychology. Do you try and get everybody to install it and get all of their friends to install it before they can share that piece of content? Or do you plug into Facebook Messenger's 600 million monthly active users?
Right.
And then only one person in a social group has to get it. One person at school gets this new thing. They can send it to all of their friends at school. A week later, everybody's tapped the download link and it's growing. And so you get a kind of a viral growth, potentially much quicker than you have if you force people to go to the App Store in order to be able to engage.
But this is Facebook's App Store, right?
Exactly. But the catch is, well, it actually takes you out to Google Play or to iTunes. The catch is they're Facebook's users.
Well, I describe that. How are they Facebook's
because
users?
You're sending it through the Messenger social graph. You're sending it into Messenger, and Facebook is deciding whether Facebook is deciding whether to feature you or not on that list. They're acting as a gatekeeper and a kingmaker. And so what they're doing, in effect, is co-opting the next Snapchat. So they're doing two things. Firstly, they're co-opting the next Snapchat. This is very seductive. Do you want to sit and slog away to try and build an audience for your type of content, or do you just drop it into Facebook Messenger?
Right.
And instantly you can get access to 600 million people. But you aren't ever going to be a $10 billion or $20 billion company because they're not your users. They're all Facebook's users.
Right.
So then the other part of this, of course, is this means that if you stay out, then you're competing not just with Facebook Messenger, but with every single app that plugs into Facebook Messenger. So what Facebook's trying to do is make Snapchat compete with the whole App Store. Because Snapchat is only going to have the content that Snapchat dreams up, whereas Facebook Messenger will have the content that anybody can dream up and decide to plug into it. So that's the vision. What they're trying to do is they are attacking the concept of the smartphone as a social platform. Because the great criticism that was made is, well, they bought Instagram for whatever it was, 1% of the value of the company, and then they bought Facebook for... So then they bought WhatsApp for, say, 10% of the value of the company. They can't keep buying everything. They didn't manage to buy Snapchat. They can't just buy every one of these ones that comes along. And so what I think they've done is they've attempted to get ahead of that and say, actually, we're going to make sure that an awful lot of the things that bubble up in the future never turn into independent networks. We just get them to flow their stuff straight into Facebook and become a platform in its own right. And so therefore, they address both this kind of the WeChat, so to speak, question of do they build a platform, but also the kind of the virality question, and try and get away from this dynamic of there being dozens of these things rising and falling all the time and turn them all into a Facebook product.
And meanwhile, let's not forget, this is happening either within Android or iOS. So how does then Facebook's, maneuver with Messenger play against both Google and Apple?
Well, this is interesting. I mean, some people have pointed out that if you read the Apple iTunes terms of conditions, it would appear to forbid Facebook Messenger. One would suspect that Apple and Facebook are both perfectly aware of that, and Apple have taken the decision. Actually, what this is doing is it's driving engagement. It's making the experience better. They don't want to block this. I think there's a broader and much more interesting point, though, for both Google and Apple, which is What's actually happening, much more broadly than Facebook Messenger, is you're seeing notifications becoming another runtime on the device. Mm-hmm. That is to say, you have the web browser and then you have native apps in part combination with the App Store. But then more and more, the way that you your primary unit of interaction is a notification. And both Apple and Google have made notifications interactive, so you can have an action button or two, and you can have a payload, so you can have an image. And then if you think about what the watch does, either Apple Watch or Android Wear, to the extent that those become a success, those in turn also reinforce this model of like an atomic unit of content.
Right. So, and it's only sort of notification at some level, right?
Well,
at least starts
it's
there.
all a notification or a message of some sense. I mean, it's you can argue about quite what you call it, but it's a little atomic unit of content. It's not the whole app, the whole experience. And so you're unbundling a piece of something, whether it's a message from a friend or a piece of information about a new product, or your calendar app pops up and says, hey, because your calendar app pops up and says, hey, you need to leave your message for your next meeting in 5 minutes. Do you want to call a car? Yes, no. And if you press yes, the API to that service just summons a car without you ever loading the app from that ride-sharing service.
Right.
And of course, then if you look on the watch again, of course, that reinforces that model of just a one-button apps or one or two-button interaction models. And so the notifications panel becomes this other runtime. And if you pull your notifications panel down now and you're not anal about clearing it out all the time, you'll see like a whole dozen or 24 bunches of things, and they're sorted differently on iOS and Android, and there's both of them have both Apple and Google have got halfway in building the notification story, in that they started from a modal dialogue that popped up and said, hey, there's a message from this, dismiss or okay, and then think, maybe we should store this somewhere.
Right.
So you get a notifications pull down, which was actually originally a third-party developer who built something for jailbroken iPhone, I think. I can't remember now. Anyway, whatever it is. Right. It didn't start out as like, this is going to be another runtime. It's kind of turned into another runtime just from the business logic and the interaction logic. And so now you've got this thing which is actually quite often my first step in interacting with a property. So you think, right, okay, how do we turn that into something that works in a systematic way? Maybe that should be sorted. Maybe there should be an algorithm for that. Maybe the Facebook newsfeed is, an analogy here. What does it mean for Google or Apple to do that? Then you think, okay, well, certainly Google is going to be interested in websites going to be being able to send notifications to the notifications panel. Certainly websites on the phone, because that's the whole vision of Chrome, is that Chrome tabs become a native citizen. So Chrome tabs are going to have to be able to send notifications. Mm-hmm. So any website you go to on your phone can send you notifications. Apple already does this on Yosemite, but those aren't personalized. It's just a news alert. So, I mean, again, you keep thinking about these swirling, moving parts. Then the next question is, well, Facebook has an identity platform. So you can go to a website, you can be logged in to the website with Facebook on your PC, then it can send messages to your phone, and their messages to you. Michael, your shoes have shipped, your surfboard has shipped, your VW is overdue to be serviced,
right.
And have a new rainbow painted on at the garage in Berkeley.
Right.
So, Google would like to have that identity platform in Plus. Plus clearly didn't work. Apple doesn't have an identity platform in that sense, and it's probably quite ambivalent about whether it wants one, given its whole sort of mission sense of we don't collect information. But on the other hand, Apple clearly has an identity story in Touch ID and in Apple Pay.
Right.
And so, there's a sort of an obvious question. The way that I think about Apple Pay is it's not very interesting at point of sale. It's very interesting inside apps, because suddenly you don't have to enter your credit card and your billing address and your shipping address. You just press yes and put your finger on the scanner. Mm-hmm. And so the question when Apple Pay came out was clearly, is the next version that you open that up to apps on the phone? Do you even open an Apple Pay up to apps on the desktop if you're on a Mac or something? Does Apple Pay become a broader identity platform? Does that become a way for you to log into websites? If so, can they send notifications? So you start kind of pursuing the idea maze off in all sorts of different directions as to what are the potential roadmaps here. The underlying point is there is this whole other model of interacting with stuff that has emerged on the mobile device. And Facebook would like to capture that and make itself that kind of primary channel. I mean, the subtext for Facebook, of course, has been, we saw this with Home, Facebook is inside one blue icon on your phone, and it wants to break out of that icon. One way it can break out is to say there's 150 things inside that blue icon, and actually you should have 3 or 4 different icons. So you have a Messenger app that actually does messaging well, and you have a Facebook proper app that actually just does the newsfeed well. But that's kind of, and then you have Instagram, which just does photos well, and so on. But that's kind of, that's just kind of, that's a sort of a sort of not terribly profound product shift. The deeper point is they want to get further down the stack on the phone itself, because the fundamental change here is that for 20 years the internet experience was a web browser and a mouse and a keyboard, and the web browser was fundamentally a neutral platform. I don't think Amazon ever sat and thought we should make a web browser.
Right. Well, maybe they did, but yeah. But they didn't actually do that, yeah.
No e-commerce company would be sitting and thinking we need to have a web browser. Facebook never made a web browser. Google did make a web browser, but that was sort of for other reasons. But then on the smartphone, it's not the web browser that's the platform, it's the phone that's the platform.
Right.
And the platform owners like Google and Apple can do stuff, like they can embed search into it, or they can embed product discovery, or they can embed social into that, or messaging into that. And so Facebook is sort of sitting as a silo and someone else who sort of sells his platform, and that someone else sort of competes with them.
That is sort of a Trojan horse, though.
They want to move out of the icon.
Yeah.
And so they tried home. That didn't work for a whole bunch of reasons. Then they're thinking, okay, maybe notifications are a better way of doing this.
Right.
Now, on Android, of course, which is something I forgot to mention in my blog post, you can make your own notifications panel and install one. So, Facebook could make a notifications panel. There are a couple of interesting entrepreneurs making them themselves. On iOS, obviously, you can't. So you think, well, okay, well, what should we do? But it feels like that's another way for Facebook to try and kind of pull back an aggregation model and try and aggregate everything that's happening on your phone.
And so do notifications become, for lack of a better word, a sort of form of portal? You mean, or are we not?
Well, yeah, we kind of, it's the old Jim Barksdale line about, the only ways to make money in software are bundling and unbundling. And so, how many different layers of bundling have we got here? This is a joke I made in another blog post about this a while ago. There's a sort of a quote from P.G. Woodhouse, where a character who thinks his fiancée has been stolen from him says that when he catches this man, he'll pull him inside out and make him swallow himself. And you think, how many times can you pull this whole model inside out? So you have the websites, you unbundle websites from the browser into apps. Then you unbundle content from the apps into notifications. Then you bundle the notifications into Facebook Messenger. Then you have a watch, and what does that do? And it's like an endless cycle, round and round and round. Where is the best place to put this stuff? This is there's another aside here, but there's a narrative in the industry that says we need a common standard for messaging apps, which to me I think completely misunderstands the motivation of anybody who's building a messaging app. That's the last thing they want. But actually, if you pull down your notifications panel on your phone, well, there it is. There's it all aggregated.
Right.
There are all your messages from 8 different services. There is your common standard. That is your common platform.
And so going forward, developers are always faced with a choice. Do I play Apple's game? Now it seems like, do I play Facebook's sort of view of the world, play within that? Does this change a developer's calculus as they're thinking where to go and how to go out?
It's always, there's always the carrot and the stick. And Facebook is offering a big juicy carrot in the form of 600 million users. They're offering, not so much a stick, but the downside is they're not your users. So there are some developers for whom this is going to be absolutely the right thing. And now suddenly you've got a route to market for your product, and you'd never really have managed to get a lot of people installing that kind of that sort of content creator that you had in mind. For others, it's very clear you shouldn't do that. And for a lot of people, it would be kind of ambivalent in the middle. I think there's 2 other strands to kind of pull out here. One of them is there's a whole the whole history of Facebook is of it creating development platforms that then kind of went away. The challenge, I think, and of course, at each stage, people had a bunch of really coherent and sensible reasons why Facebook wouldn't shoot them in the back of the head, and somehow or other, it always ended up happening.
They did, yeah.
So I think there is a difference here in that where the reason that Facebook tended to pull back in the past was that it's very, very rigorously focused on protecting the user experience of the newsfeed, and that if stuff's happening that's annoying people, it will shut it down, no matter how much it's previously said that it was committed to making that work or something. Now, the point is, though, the newsfeed is algorithmically filtered. Your friend list and the stuff that your friends send to you is not.
Right.
And so they can shut down an app that's annoying. If you've got an app that's automatically posting stuff into all of your friends' newsfeed and it's annoying them, Facebook will turn off the tap.
Right.
But if I'm sending my friends pictures of GIFs, Facebook isn't going to start editing what I send to them. I mean, it might pull the app if the app is posting stuff that's making the app crash or something, but it's not going to just say, well, your friends don't, we decided that quite a lot of people don't like getting animated GIFs, so you're not going to be able to send them anymore. It's just a completely different calculation. It's not the newsfeed, that's my point.
I hope that day never comes.
Everything else was the newsfeed. This is not the newsfeed. This is not filtered and curated. So there is no algorithm where Facebook would change settings to break this. The other thing, and this is sort of, to go to a much higher level, you couldn't do Meerkat using Facebook's platform. I mean, you could tell all your friends you're posting to, but you couldn't deliver that content type. You couldn't do live video using this. All you could do is send them a link, which is, really, who cares? It's not, which is what people are doing on Twitter. You couldn't really do Snapchat either. You couldn't, that is in the sense of getting messages to disappear. Mm-hmm. You certainly couldn't do what WeChat's doing, which is actually sharing, having embedded apps within it, although Facebook may well add that later. And so, the thing that's kind of happens is, we're kind of in this wave where there are a whole bunch of people doing kind of cool things that you can share with people inside a chat app. That's fine. But actually, the next thing that comes along that's going to be huge may well not be something that works like this. It may be another interaction model. It may be something that doesn't look like Messenger. That's the point. And I think Facebook is, you can argue that they're trying to get ahead of this and reset this dynamic of the smartphone as a social platform that allows hundreds of competitors by tempting those hundreds of competitors to adopt the Facebook platform in order to do this, because it's easier to get app installs. And let's make this clear as well. If someone fixed app installs, this is Facebook's attempt to fix app installs as well. Amusingly, incidentally, it undermines their app install ad revenue, because now your apps can go viral without, which is another interesting question. But the point is, it's sort of predicated on the current structure of, well, this is what people share, and this is this problem with getting people to install apps. So to the extent that problem gets solved, this becomes irrelevant. And I think, to make a higher level point, as I said earlier, we had the web browser and the mouse and the keyboard for 20 years, and that was the model. And then for 10 or 15 years, we had Google there on top of that. And then we went to smartphones, and we left that behind. Clearly, we have a much more complicated model now with all sorts of different stuff going on, including this and WeChat and, Passbook and Siri and Now and all sorts of other stuff. But we haven't actually settled on something new. And so everything keeps changing. And I think what we're seeing, then you go back to your question of, well, Apple and Facebook versus Apple, Google. Well, what are Apple and Google going to do about notifications this summer? They might do something really radical around an identity platform and letting you send stuff from the web. They might not. They might have some whole other roadmap.
And Facebook is running hard in this one direction. It turns out we're going to go in a completely different
sort of direction. It may be that Apple go off in an orthogonal direction and just ignore this.
Yeah.
Or ignore notifications. It may be that Apple's got this big plan for how they rebuild notifications and Google doesn't. It's actually quite likely both of them got a big plan for how they rebuild notifications, unlike a 4-year roadmap. And Apple's will drop at a different time to Google's. Apple's will drop one summer and Google's will drop another summer. And everyone will say, oh my God, Apple ripped off Google or Google ripped off Apple. And it's actually like, no, come on. This is not how software development works.
Right.
But the point is, there's roadmaps there. There's roadmaps around things like Siri and Now, and around location and around the watch and all this other stuff. And so, to my point, these are not neutral platforms, and they're changing all the time. The web didn't change like this.
Right.
The web browser was kind of there, and it kind of gained better standards and what have you. But you didn't fundamentally have whole completely new stuff that somebody could do.
Well, and to your point, though, I mean, and based on what you've observed over time, it likely will continue to change, right? Or it's not like we land on something that works and, okay, we've done it, let's stick with this.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of what happened with the web. And the web you had the web, and then people spent 20 years fixing it and making it work better and adding all the standards and the stuff that you have now that let you do Ajax and everything else. But it was kind of the web.
Right.
And it was very, very hard to do anything outside it. Obviously, you have email sitting inside a client, and then you have things like Spotify and Skype around the sides. But basically, everything happened in the browser. It was a square box with an address bar at the top. And that was it. That was your real estate. Whereas on a smartphone, it's just way, way, way wide open as to what the interaction models are going to look like. I mean, to go off on another tangent, it's entirely possible that in 5 years' time, Google's mobile story is a Chrome phone that only runs web apps. That is to say, the iPhone, ironically, that's what the iPhone was in 2007. It's an app that only runs, a phone that doesn't run native code, only runs web apps. And of course, Apple is getting more and more open, and you have extensions, and you have APIs, and you have all this other stuff going on. So, it's tremendously exciting. It's tremendously complicated, and I think, this creates these sorts of opportunities for Facebook to try and insert itself into various places in the user flow to make itself more central to the way that you use your phone. So this is not about GIFs, but obviously it is about GIFs, but it's also about a lot of other stuff as to how Facebook can make itself kind of central onto your device.
Benedict, as this unfolds, we will talk more about it, and and as other players trying to wedge themselves into this as well. So whether it's coming from Asia and WeChat and others, we'll keep you here and keep us up to date.
Cool.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.